Joseph Stalin was the leader of the Soviet Union from 1924 until he died in 1953. He oversaw the Red Army and governed during World War II, and celebrated the victory over Nazism and Adolf Hitler. He was initially tied to Germany in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, when it looked likely that peace would exist between the Soviets and the Nazis. However, this quickly changed, and the two were engaged in some of the most ferocious and brutal battles that the world has ever seen. However, what isn't as well known is the fact that Hitler did manage to capture one of Stalin's sons during the Second World War, and that Joseph Stalin's son was killed inside a concentration camp, a place which great suffering occurred. Today we look at the brutal execution of Stalin's son, Yakov Dzhugashvili. Remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Born on the 31st of March 1907, Yakov Dzhugashvili was born to Kato Svannis and Joseph Dzhugashvili, later Joseph Stalin. His father nicknamed him Patsana after birth. However, months after Yakov's birth, his father was caught up in a bank robbery, and the family left to Baku to seek refuge and to avoid arrest. They rented a small house and later returned. However, his mother died from typhus on the 5th of December 1907. This left Stalin and his son alone, but he then left his son to be raised with his wife's family, and would be a rather distant father. Yakov spent 14 years being raised by his aunts before he was sent to Moscow to live with his dad. He did not understand Russian, and his father shunned him, banning him from adopting the name Stalin. He slept in the dining room of Stalin's apartments, and Yakov was described as a kind child. He later attended university, graduating from the Institute of Transport before working as an engineer in an electric plant factory. However, in 1937 he began training in the artillery academy. Things had been very tense between Yakov and his father for some time. In 1928, Yakov asked to marry a daughter of a priest named Zoya. However, Stalin refused this, and because of this Yakov tried to take his own life, only missing his heart with a gunshot by centimetres. He did have a number of girlfriends before getting married. Now, as the Second World War broke out, it was clear that Adolf Hitler would eventually turn his attention towards the Soviet Union. The Nazis saw the Soviets as their enemies and wished to rid Europe of communism. However, the invasion of the Soviet Union came in June 1941 with Operation Barbarossa. Wehrmacht tanks flew into Soviet territory, and Stalin was forced with the reality that the German war machine could take over his territory. Stalin forced Yakov, along with his adopted son, to the front lines. Yakov was a lieutenant in a battery of an artillery division, the 14th Howitzer Regiment of the 14th Tank Division. However, things did not go well. Within a month of the Nazi invasion, he had been captured during the Battle of Smolensk. The Germans surrounded the battery where Yakov was, and the order was given to retreat. However, Yakov disobeyed the order. He said, "I am the son of Stalin, and I do not allow the battery to retreat." Some sources claim that Yakov's position was passed to the Germans by some Soviet forces, as they became hostile to Stalin's regime, and others say he surrendered of his own accord. What isn't disputed is the huge propaganda value that the son of Stalin's capture had in Germany. On the 19th of July 1941, the capture was announced, and Stalin was furious seeing his own son as a disgrace. He ordered no soldier to surrender and to fight to the death, and the fact his own son did this was seen as shocking. He was fuming and wished his own son had killed himself rather than being captured. Initially, Yakov Dzhugashvili tried to take off his officers' badges. However, he was recognised and then interrogated by the Abwehr. Whilst being interviewed, he spoke about how he believed the Red Army were ill prepared for war, and that the military leaders were acting terribly. He also saw the British as weak, and said they never helped the Soviets, and instead praised Germany. As the Germans had confirmed his identity, the propaganda wheel flew into motion, with leaflets of his picture being dropped over Soviet soldiers. Images were shown of him smiling with the enemy, and it also said, "Dear father, I have been taken prisoner. I am in good health. I will soon be sent to a camp for officers in Germany. I am being treated well. I wish you good health." The Soviets responded, awarding Yakov with the Order of the Red Banner for his actions during battle. However, Stalin's son was then taken deep into the heart of the Nazi Empire, to Berlin. It was planned that Goebbels himself would make him broadcast over the radio, but this never occurred, and instead he was taken to Sachsenhausen Concentration Camp. Sachsenhausen was a concentration camp established in 1936, and it held mostly political prisoners. Around 200,000 prisoners passed through the barbed wire fences during its time. However, dozens of thousands were killed there. It was a labour camp that was fitted with gas chambers and also medical experimentation facilities. The prisoners there were treated terribly, forced to work incredibly hard on little food, and were openly executed in front of other prisoners. Yakov was taken here, and then he was treated almost like a celebrity at the camp. Visitors tried to see him, but he argued with British prisoners and would often get into fights with them. As the tide of the Second World War began to swing in the favour of the Soviet Red Army, following the German surrender at Stalingrad, an offer was made to exchange Stalin's son for General Paulus, which was refused by Stalin. He refused to exchange his son for a prize asset, and with this he practically signed his own son's death warrant. Now things inside of the concentration camp declined for Yakov Dzhugashvili, and on the 14th of December he died. However, how he died remains partly disputed. It was clear Stalin did not want anything to do with him and felt disgraced by him. However, different accounts tell us different stories of his death. One account states how he was killed after he took his own life by running into a high voltage electric fence that surrounded the camp. Other prisoners would do this when they had been completely broken, and their bodies were left out for days once this happened. Another account states how he was in fact executed by the Germans after he was deemed no use when Stalin declined the offer to exchange him for Paulus. However, after the war, the British found records in Sachsenhausen that pointed towards both of these theories being partly true. After the German archives were analysed, the records stated that Yakov Dzhugashvili ran into an electric fence after he'd been arguing with British prisoners. It's alleged he did this to try and get away, and he ran into the fence possibly by accident or on purpose. However, after this, German officers then went over to his body and delivered a coup de grace, shooting the son of Stalin 4 times to ensure that he was in fact dead. Despite being disgraced by his son, Stalin allegedly was greatly upset by the news of his death. His opinion changed of his son, and he believed that Yakov was in fact a real man, and he said that life had been unfair to him. It was said Stalin repeatedly stared at Yakov Dzhugashvili's picture for hours after his death. Had things have been very different, then it's believed he could have been much more senior within Stalin's government, but the leader of the Soviet Union was reminded too much of the tragic death of his first wife by his eldest son. The life of Yakov Dzhugashvili is a sad one, dominated by the neglect of his father, an incredibly powerful man who should have cared a lot more than he did. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.